Welcome back to Disturbed Reality. In the world of Mexican cartels, the word trafficker often conjures up images of lavish mansions, gold-plated pistols, and kingpins living like celebrities. But Miguel Trevino Morales, aka Z-40, was different. He wasn't a businessman in disguise or a playboy chasing fame. He was something far darker. Trevino ran his empire like a battlefield commander, more warlord than trafficker. He ruled through sheer brutality, mass executions, public displays of violence, and a code of fear that left entire towns paralysed. Far from the stereotype of a flamboyant kingpin, Z-40 embodied raw violence, commanding loyalty through fear and reshaping the very nature of organised crime in Mexico. But nevertheless, let's explore the rise of one of Mexico's most notorious traffickers, Miguel Trevino Morales, aka Z-40. Miguel Angel Trevino Morales was born on the 18th of November 1970 in the bustling city of Nuevo Laredo in Tamaulipas State, Mexico, a stone's throw away from the US border. Miguel was one of 13 children, had by his father Rodolfo Trevino and mother Maria Arcelia Morales. Miguel had 6 brothers and 6 sisters. Among his siblings, at least 4 also engaged in organised crime in later life, these being his brothers Omar, Jose, Juan, as well as his sister Annabelle. Like many families along the US-Mexico border, the Trevino family travelled from Mexico to the United States and vice versa, where they actually bought properties and opened several businesses. During Miguel's early childhood, the Trevino Morales family were relatively successful. During these early years, Miguel would pick up a skill that would go on to become invaluable in his later career. That being, he became bilingual. Aside from speaking Spanish, he also spoke fluent English because of his exposure to the USA and his family ties there. However, during his youth, Miguel's father Rodolfo would abandon the family home for unknown reasons, leaving his mother, Maria Arcelia, to look after the children, and this would plunge the Trevino Morales family into the lower working class. Trevino Morales grew up disliking Mexico's class disparity and developed so much resentment, which some attribute as a factor to his violent behaviour as an adult. During his teenage years, Trevino Morales walked the rich neighbourhoods of Nuevo Laredo looking for work, knocking on doors, offering his services for odd jobs, such as cutting grass or washing cars. While doing honest work and earning very modest money, Miguel met a man named Hector Manuel Saucedo Gamboa, aka El Carice. Gamboa was a flamboyant, affluent individual who was a drug trafficker for the Gulf Cartel, and Gamboa took a liking to Miguel. It's believed that Gamboa was the one who opened the door to Miguel Trevino Morales to enter the world of organised crime. From washing cars, running errands, and stealing car parts in Nuevo Laredo, Trevino Morales then turned to the drug trade, starting with small-scale drug retail sales and smuggling. From early, Miguel Trevino Morales proved to be an effective drug smuggler, partly down to his connects in Dallas, Texas, and his ability to speak English. In fact, in his late teens and early 20s, Trevino Morales spent a significant time in Texas, essentially living there at some points. In 1993, he was apprehended in Dallas County and was charged with avoiding police arrest, after he had tried to evade the police in a car chase that ended in a street dead end. He paid roughly a $600 fine and was subsequently released from county prison. Few other details are known about Trevino Morales' life in Dallas, but the US authorities believed that he learned about power, money, weapons, and the vast consumer market for illegal drugs while living in Texas. They also believe that he perceived an anti-Mexican bias among some Americans, especially towards Mexican immigrants like him. However, Trevino Morales considered Dallas his home because of his large family network that lives in the surrounding areas. In fact, on the surface, Miguel's older brother, Juan Francisco, seemed to have carved out a successful life for himself in Texas. He ran a landscaping business and was doing rather well for himself. Though, on the 29th of December 1993, Miguel's brother Juan's vehicle was stopped by the US Customs Agency, where he was quizzed by the agents. He was asked questions, such as whether he had any more than $10,000 of cash in the vehicle, to which Juan denied. though upon a search of his vehicle, customs agents found around $50,000 and Juan was subsequently arrested under the suspicion of drug trafficking. He operated a landscaping business where he employed many members of the Trevino Morales family, but he made his real money smuggling weed from Nuevo Laredo into Texas. He was stung due to an undercover agent infiltrating his trafficking ring. The brother of Miguel, Juan Francisco, was found guilty of drug trafficking and was sentenced to a long stretch behind bars. Around this time, Miguel Trevino left the States and headed back to Nuevo Laredo, where he joined a local gang known as Los Tejas. Los Tejas at the time were essentially controlled by local kingpin Hector Manuel Soseda Gamboa, and they were eventually absorbed into the Gulf Cartel faction known as Los Lobos or Grupo L. The Gulf Cartel recognised Miguel Trevino's work in Los Tejas, and they recruited him to join the organisation in the late 1990s. This was due to his impressive knack of smuggling and trafficking. They found his connects in Texas valuable, as well as his ability to speak English. Miguel Trevino Morales quickly climbed the ranks of the Gulf Cartel, and impressed the then boss, Osiel Cardenas. During the early 2000s, Miguel Trevino Morales was transferred to the Gulf Cartel's growing armed wing, Los Zetas. Not only was Miguel Trevino Morales an effective trafficker, but he was also an incredibly sadistic and violent individual, which the Zetas found appealing. He was also an effective leader of men and very charismatic. Miguel Trevino garnered the nickname Z-40 or Zeta-40, and again, he quickly raised through the Zeta ranks. In around 2005, Trevino Morales was appointed by the Gulf Cartel as the regional boss of Nuevo Laredo, replacing his old mentor, Hector Manuel Soseda Gamboa, who had become unreliable due to his crippling cocaine habits. 2005 was the year when Miguel Trevino Morales truly solidified himself, both within the Gulf Cartel and Zeta hierarchy, as at this time, Nuevo Laredo was in the crosshairs of Sinaloa Cartel kingpin Joaquin El Chapo Guzman. Due to its strategic border location, Chapo wanted Nuevo Laredo for himself, and he sent hit squad after hit squad to the area to try and start a war and oust both the Golfos and the Zetas. However, it was a task too big for even El Chapo and the Sinaloa Cartel, and Golfo and Zeta gunmen successfully pushed back the invading Sinaloan sicarios. Ultimately, the Zetas were better equipped and better trained. This brief war was the first glimpse that the mainstream had into the Zetas' capability and brutality. Very often, they would leave mutilated bodies of Sinaloa Cartel sicarios in broad daylight, in public places as warnings to the Sinaloa Cartel. Trevino Morales, successfully leading the pushback of the Sinaloan army, garnered him much respect within the Golfos, but in particular within Los Zetas. Unlike the other original Zeta members, Miguel Trevino did not have a military background, but his brutality and leadership even impressed the Zeta leadership, including El Lasca, Heriberto Lazcano. One of the darkest aspects of the war with the Sinaloa Cartel in 2005 was Miguel Trevino's recruitment methods. He became known for identifying and grooming young teenagers who he believed had the potential to become professional assassins for Los Zetas. These recruits, sometimes called Zetitas or Little Zetas, usually joined organised crime as young as 12 years old to work first as smugglers and later as paid assassins. By 2006, the Gulf Cartel and Los Zetas managed to defeat the forces of the Sinaloa Cartel in Nuevo Laredo. The latter organisation concentrated its efforts in northeastern Mexico, becoming more dominant there. Los Zetas then started to expand into other criminal activities beyond drug trafficking. Under Trevino Morales, the organisation smuggled immigrants into the United States, carried out extortions and kidnappings, sold bootlegged CDs and DVDs, and very often intimidated and/or killed residents who failed to cooperate with them. Trevino Morales by this time was also the regional boss of Nuevo Leon and Coahuila states. In March of 2007, Z-40 was transferred to become regional boss of Veracruz state, following the death of high-ranking Zetas leader, Efrain Teodoro Torres aka Z-14, who was killed in a gun battle at a local horse race. Although Golfo boss Osiel Cardenas was imprisoned in 2003, he reportedly directed the Gulf Cartel and Los Zetas from behind bars. However, when he was extradited to the United States in 2007, cracks started to form within the Zeta-Golfo relationship. High-ranking Zetas, such as Miguel Trevino Morales and Heriberto Lazcano, began to start pushing for greater independence, as by this time, they was responsible for generating a huge portion of the Gulf Cartel's revenue. Despite the growing resentment between the two groups, they managed to maintain their alliance for a few more years. In November of 2007, the city of Laredo, Texas, issued an arrest warrant for Trevino in connection with a 2006 double homicide in Texas, highlighting that his violence was affecting both sides of the border. In February of 2008, Zeta leader Heriberto Lazcano tasked Miguel Trevino Morales to kill rival drug traffickers and take control of drug trafficking routes in Guatemala. Reportedly, he carried out a military-like ambush that resulted in the death of the Guatemalan drug lord Juan Jose Leon Ardon in March of that year. An unnamed US official said that Trevino Morales very likely was the man who fired the bullet that killed the drug kingpin. Having succeeded outside of Mexico, Trevino Morales was then appointed by Lazcano as the national commander of Los Zetas, a position traditionally reserved for Zeta members with a military background. This essentially made Z-40 the official second-in-command of Los Zetas, basically the vice president. In this new role, Trevino Morales had a say in nearly all of the decisions Los Zetas made at a national level, creating some resentment among the old generation commanders of Los Zetas who, unlike him, had been in the Mexican armed forces before turning to the drug trade. One of Morales' biggest decisions in his new role was his agreement with Zeta leader Heriberto Lazcano to form an alliance with the Beltran-Leyva cartel, and this was without consulting the Gulf cartel. The Beltran-Leyva organization at this time had just split from the Sinaloan Federation following the capture of Alfredo Beltran-Leyva, aka El Mochomo, by authorities, and the remaining Beltran-Leyva brothers, mainly Arturo, El Jefe de Jefes, blamed El Chapo for the capture of Alfredo. The Zetas supported the Beltran-Leyva's war efforts against the Sinaloa cartel in an attempt to weaken the likes of El Chapo Guzman and El Mayo Zambada, as well as the Sinaloan Federation as a whole. In the position of national commander, it was at this time when Miguel Trevino's name began to circulate in mainstream media, and his violent tendencies were revealed to the world. Trevino Morales acted as a cartel gatekeeper, and his people collected a piso, a tariff, at all drug territories controlled by the Zetas. He controlled the highly lucrative Nuevo Laredo Plaza across the border from Laredo, Texas. He bribed and intimidated officials to help maintain control, and responded to any challenges to his authority or control with brutal violence. Trevino was feared, and very few local journalists dare write about him. He was alleged to have a favourite torture method known as el guiso, or the stew in English, in which people are stuffed into an oil barrel, doused with gasoline or diesel fuel, and then set on fire to be burnt alive. Trevino Morales reportedly coordinated several violent attacks throughout Mexico, including the murder of 72 migrants in 2010 and the massacre of 193 people a year later in San Fernando, Tamaulipas. He is also believed to have threatened to shoot down the plane of the former Mexican president, Felipe Calderón, in August 2020, while on a trip to the state of Tamaulipas. Although it was not the first time Calderón received death threats from organised crime, the authorities deemed the drug lord's threat as credible and urged the president to cancel his trip, though he ultimately went anyway. Journalist Alfredo Corchado, the head of the Dallas Morning News in Mexico, wrote in one of his books that Trevino Morales enjoyed eating out the hearts of his victims, even when they were still beating, because he believed that doing so would make him invincible among his enemies and authorities. His levels of violence made him almost a cult-like figure, and his most devoted followers would recreate his violence in honour of their boss, as well as to impress him. The most disturbing story about Miguel Trevino Morales details the alleged murder of a rival's newly born infant. The story goes that upon storming a rival's home, a raid where Trevino was present, it said that before killing the rival, Miguel Trevino Morales personally murdered the rival's newborn baby by either placing the baby in a microwave or dropping it into a pot of boiling oil. Quick disclaimer, it's not clear whether this story is actually true, but given what we do know what he's guilty of, I certainly think it's plausible. A former hitman who worked for him told the press in 2013 that Trevino Morales could not sleep at night if he didn't kill somebody that day. He also said that the drug lord would ask his victims how they wanted to be killed. Treviño Morales spent a lot of time at Zeta ranches where executions took place, and very often Miguel Trevino Morales would participate himself. Trevino also liked to play psychological games on his victims before committing acts of violence. A now incarcerated former Zeta sicario, Rosalio Reta, in an interview, detailed how Miguel Trevino personally groomed him into becoming a killer after being recruited at 13. He recounts a story having seen Miguel Trevino personally behead a captive by continuously shooting at the victim's neck until he was decapitated. He also recounts another story where Miguel Trevino had captured 2 brothers who were tortured and interrogated before he gave the brothers an ultimatum. He told them only one of you is making it out alive. He then said, "I want you to fight to the death and the winner can walk out." The brothers agreed to fight barehanded until there was a winner. Apparently, Trevino still executed the winning brother afterwards. According to several sources, Miguel reportedly survived gun battles unharmed, avoided making close alliances with anyone, dismembered dozens of victims while they were still alive, and dumped them, and seemed to be unafraid to die. Many attribute this fearlessness to his ritualistic belief in cannibalism keeping him safe. He didn't just kill those involved in cartel life, however. Organization members claimed that Treviño Morales enjoyed driving around the city in a car, pointing at people at random and saying, "Kill this one and kill that one." During his tenure, he was widely regarded as one of the most violent drug lords operating in Mexico, and many consider him to be among the most violent gang leaders in the Western Hemisphere's history. Treviño Morales reportedly moved around through Mexico and Central America, and often met with Colombian drug lords in Mexico City, the nation's capital, to do business. To escape law enforcement notice, he used caravans of purported businessmen and religious persons. In the northern part of the country, he reportedly maintained a close tie with a number of politicians. His brother Omar Treviño Morales, Z-42, was the regional Zeta boss in the Gulf of Mexico. As mentioned, following the Gulf cartel's leader Osiel Cardenas' extradition to the USA, the Zetas continuously pushed for greater and greater independence, and as time went on, they demanded that a Zeta should be the one to control the entire Gulf cartel operation. Several prominent Zetas wanted Heriberto Lazcano to lead the organization, though prominent Gulf cartel members wanted the leadership to be kept within the Golfo hierarchy. The Golfo Zeta Alliance, also known in the media as La Campaña or the Company, hit breaking point by early 2010. The Zetas became increasingly more disobedient of the Gulf cartel hierarchy. On the 18th of January 2010, several Gulf cartel members kidnapped Victor Peña Mendoza, aka El Concord III, a leader of Los Zetas and a close associate and friend of Treviño Morales. When he was held captive, Peña Mendoza was asked to switch alliances to join the Gulf cartel, but he refused and pledged his allegiance to the Zetas. Following his refusal, he was tortured and then murdered by Gulf cartel sicarios, assumed to have been commanded by Samuel Flores Borrego. Following the death of his friend and associate, Miguel Treviño Morales was seething, and he dished out his own ultimatum. He released a public message, both to Samuel Flores Borrego and the new Gulf cartel leader, Jorge Eduardo Costilla Sanchez. It read the following: "Hand over the assassin of my friend, you son of a bitch. You have until the 25th of January. If you don't comply, there will be war." Both of the Gulf cartel leaders ignored the command, and Treviño Morales moved swiftly to avenge the death of his former comrades. On the 30th of January 2010, Treviño Morales kidnapped and slaughtered 16 Gulf cartel members in Reynosa, Tamaulipas, marking the start of a cartel war between the Gulf cartel and Los Zetas, primarily in the Mexican states of Tamaulipas, Veracruz, and Nuevo León. This war led to thousands of deaths and countless displacements of civilians caught up in the violence. When the war kick-started, Mexico was subjected to a whole new level of cartel violence, and the world was also exposed to this savagery via the internet. One of the trademarks of the Golfo Zeta War was the proliferation of brutal propaganda footage and filmed executions. While the Golfo Zeta War did not pioneer this tactic of cartel execution videos, the war certainly popularized the tactic. In the early 2010s, a new graphic execution video was released almost weekly. One week, the Golfos would release a horrific beheading video, and the next week, the Zetas would release their own execution video. Los Zetas used violence and intimidation tactics to expand, forging a reputation as Mexico's most violent drug trafficking organization. With Trevino Morales as second-in-command of the criminal organization, Los Zetas began killing Gulf Cartel members and other rival drug traffickers en masse and winning their territories, starting a brutal expansion campaign. Despite their early success in their war with the Gulf Cartel, the Zetas also began to experience internal leadership disputes by 2011. The internal strife started when Z-7, Jesus Enrique Rejon Aguilar, aka El Mamito, one of their highest ranking leaders, was arrested in July of 2011. After his arrest, though he did not call out any names, he stated that somebody within Los Zetas had betrayed him. Shortly thereafter, alleged organised crime members uploaded a narco corrido music video on YouTube portraying Trevino Morales as the new Judas, and accusing him of setting up the arrests and deaths of other commanders within the criminal organisation, and also being disloyal to Heriberto Lazcano, his boss. The truth was, however, Trevino had a great deal of support within the Zetas, especially among the Zeta sicarios and foot soldiers. He had begun to take control of more and more Zeta assets since 2010, despite Heriberto Lazcano being the official leader. In a flurry of articles in late August of 2012, a US law enforcement official told the press that Miguel Trevino Morales, the former second-in-command of Los Zetas, had reportedly taken the leadership of the cartel and displaced Lazcano, the longtime leader. Initially, Heriberto Lazcano was happy to have a man like Trevino Morales in his ranks, but he reportedly underestimated him and gave him too much power. The active role of Trevino Morales got him the loyalty and respect of many in Los Zetas, and eventually, many stopped paying loyalty to Heriberto Lazcano. Personality-wise, Trevino Morales and Lazcano were opposing figures. Trevino Morales tended to prefer violence, and while Lazcano was still violent, he was a lot steadier and preferred to keep his organisation as a stable group. Heriberto Lazcano reportedly wanted Los Zetas to be less of a problem for the next political administration of Enrique Peña Nieto, though in contrast, Trevino Morales was somebody who wanted to fight the fight. However, other reports state that Trevino Morales and Lazcano had actually kept their alliance, and the rumours of the infighting started when several men of Trevino Morales' faction did not want him as leader. Regardless of the rumours, the official Zeta leader, Heriberto Lazcano, was killed by the Mexican Navy in the state of Coahuila on the 7th of October 2012, and Trevino Morales succeeded him as the top leader of Los Zetas. By 2012, Trevino had total control of the Zeta organisation, and his brother Omar, Z-42, became second in command. They were getting the better of the Gulf Cartel, who were losing more and more influence as the months passed, and his Zeta organisation were expanding and consolidating territory. Despite their success, however, under the leadership of Trevino Morales, the Zetas ultimately forgot what brought them to the dance: military leadership and discipline. Miguel Trevino and the Zetas had ultimately made too much noise, and they were in the crosshairs of US authorities and became an embarrassment for the Mexican government. With several bounties and indictments on his head, Z-40's time was nearly up. A month before his capture, US authorities had been passing down information to their counterparts in Mexico that Miguel Trevino Morales was making frequent trips to the Nuevo Laredo border area to see his newborn baby. They got this intelligence from wiretaps, conversations, and informants' tips. Trevino Morales was finally apprehended by the Mexican Marines in Nuevo Leon, near the border of Tamaulipas State, at around 3:45 AM on the 15th of July 2013, without a single shot being fired. The truck that he was travelling in was intercepted on the road by a Black Hawk helicopter from the Navy, and when the Marines got off the helicopter and tried to apprehend him, the capo attempted to escape by running through some bushes, but he was later caught. He was in possession of $2 million cash, 8 weapons, and hundreds of rounds of ammunition. 2 other men were also arrested with him and taken into custody. Rumours of Trevino Morales' arrest and a mugshot of him in custody began to circulate through Twitter and other social media outlets around noon that day, but the Mexican government did not confirm the arrest, nor did the US authorities receive a formal confirmation until hours later. At the time of his arrest, Trevino Morales had pending charges for organised crime involvement, drug trafficking, torture, money laundering, and the illegal use of firearms under Mexican law, among other charges. However, he only declared the money and firearms that were confiscated during his arrest. Following the arrest of Miguel Trevino, his brother Omar Z-42 took control over the Zetas, though the organisation at this point was a sinking ship, and many within the organisation did not respect Z-42 like they did his brother. Omar Trevino Morales, Z-42, was then also arrested on the 4th of March 2015. Omar Trevino Morales was captured inside a residence in Fuentes del Valle, an upper-class neighbourhood of San Pedro Garza Garcia in Nuevo Leon, by the federal police and the Mexican army. Much like was the case with his brother, not a single shot was fired. By this time, the Zetas were essentially no more, due to the organisation being gutted of its leadership. Factionalism and fragmentation then occurred, and various groups splintered to go independent, such as Cartel del Noreste, which was started by Trevino Morales' family members, as well as Los Zetas Vieja Escuela, the old school Zetas. Cartel del Noreste in the subsequent years have arguably gone on to become the third largest cartel in Mexico, but they no longer have anywhere close to the power that the original Zetas once had, and they are far less powerful than the likes of CJNG, as well as the Sinaloa cartel factions. Miguel Trevino Morales remained in the Mexican prison system for 12 years without facing extradition, and during this time, it's widely suspected by both narco-journalists and US authorities that Trevino Morales actually had power within the Zeta splinter group, Cartel del Noreste. He's been accused of ordering assassinations while behind bars. However, on the 27th of February 2025, the brutal Trevino Morales story would come to an end, along with 20 other narco figures who were extradited to the United States. His brother Omar would also be among those extradited. The pair are currently awaiting sentence in the USA. Many argue that both Miguel and Omar deserve the death penalty, and quite frankly, I find it very hard to disagree. While Miguel can no longer harm anyone while he rots away in his cell, his bloody legacy still lives on in Mexico. The levels of violence he brought to the cartel world still reverberates to this day. Ultimately, his violent tendencies made other cartels follow suit, just in order to be able to compete. And sadly, we still see these levels of violence persist today in Mexico. While he isn't as grand a name as El Chapo Guzman or Pablo Escobar, I find Miguel Trevino Morales to possibly be the most terrifying trafficker that I have ever read about. Sometimes when researching crime in general, naturally the nature versus nurture debate is prevalent, particularly to those among us who are religiously or spiritually inclined. And when it comes to Miguel Trevino, he strikes me as a figure who was uniquely evil. Perhaps regardless of his circumstances or upbringing, he was always destined for violence. I do believe these people walk among us. But that is the story of Miguel Trevino Morales, aka Z-40, the most brutal Mexican cartel trafficker of our time.